I don't know what the problem is. What's the problem?
I don't understand the physics here.
Like, I don't understand the physics. Like, from a scientific perspective, because I'm a physicist, and from a scientific perspective, this can't happen. Hey there. I'm thinking the same thing as you when you saw this title or this thumbnail, which is, I can't. And why can't I? Because it's Keemstar, who I don't think I've ever spoken about on my channel. But I have to. And why is that? Because it's Keemstar, and somehow he has amassed a lot of followers, and he's putting out dangerous messages. And, here's the thing. I've heard people say not to take Keemstar seriously because he's nothing but a troll. Here's the other thing. I don't take him seriously. He strikes me as somebody who has just figured out how to make money on YouTube and is, I would say, riding that train to high heaven, but he's riding it straight to hell. The things this man will say. I had to adjust my necklace in hopes to calm myself down. Yeah, Keemstar's the kind of person who I wouldn't normally want to give any sort of attention to, except that what I woke up to this morning, which was his beautiful face, was a message that I found to be so disparaging and so dangerous that we need to talk about it. Even though this is regarding the Jake Paul situation, and as far as I know, videos on Jake Paul are being suppressed, so be it. Here's the link to my Patreon if you'd like to support me there. But either way, what matters is getting this message out. And to my audience, to the people who come here and have minds of their own, or minds, you don't need to hear me say this, but I think we need people to say it, if that makes sense. Like, you don't need me to tell you that what Keemstar says in this clip is a total sack of bullshit. But I think the more we say it, the more it shows that we don't accept it. So Keemstar put out a clip on Twitter this morning, or I saw it this morning, pretending to not know what the problem was with the essay allegation made against Jake Paul by the TikToker Jasmine something or other. I'll probably put her on the screen. If you're not up to date with that, I would suggest going and watching her video. I found her to seem very credible. The default is to believe victims, and so by default, I believe her, but also everything that she said just sounded credible, and the way she told her story sounded credible. That's not what's important in terms of this video and what I'm trying to say here about Keemstar. Keemstar put on this big act, and I sure as hell hope it was an act. This man, let me point out before I say, this man is a father to a girl. He has a daughter. Keep that in mind through the duration of this video.
Hey guys, I need to do a DramaAlert today on the Jake Paul allegations, and quite frankly, I do not believe the alleged victim. And I don't want to just cover this real quick on DramaAlert without getting some pushback. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe I'm not seeing a certain angle to the story. That's why I'm making this Twitter video, so I can be challenged before I put it on DramaAlert in front of millions of people. But this girl is claiming that Jake Paul, was kissing her, holding her hand, led her to her room. She didn't want to do any further stuff with him. And then Jake Paul, grabbed her head and started her face. And within 30 seconds, in her mouth. And she claims that she was assaulted. Now, how does that happen? What? Wouldn't she have to open her mouth and participate in some way for that to happen? Can't you just turn your head, or can't you just get is there some way to force oral on someone? I mean, she's not saying that he had a weapon and was like, you better do this. She is saying that he grabbed her head and started her and came in her. I don't understand the physics here. I don't understand how that's possible. Why? can't you get away? Is there really no way to get away? Is there really no way to just close your mouth, like, and just not let the enter your mouth? Like, I'm sorry, but I just don't believe this story at all. Am I missing something here? Please challenge me. Please challenge me, right? Like, I don't want to go in front of millions of people, get called a victim blamer, and not have a piece of information that I should have. But, like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. It sounds like BS. Please challenge me.
In this video, in this clip, Keemstar goes on to say that he just doesn't understand what the problem was and how this is an SA. How is it that Jake Paul and this girl Jasmine could have engaged in this sexual act and that it couldn't have been consenting on her part? Because, like, she had her mouth open. So, like, he's just kind of, like, acting like it's just, like, not physically possible. And in fact, he keeps saying, I don't understand the physics. I don't understand the physics. Somebody explain to me. I don't know that I get it. Please explain to me, because, you know, I want to know if there's something that I'm missing or something like that, which, if we're being real, like, is Keemstar the kind of guy that's willing to have his thoughts challenged and his mind changed? That's not entirely rhetorical. I don't keep up with the guy enough to know whether or not he can be decent sometimes. Just what I've seen of him is not. And what I saw in this clip was not a decent person. Keemstar doesn't understand. Well, okay. So for anybody who might not know the details of this SA allegation, it was very graphic, and so I'm going to try to refrain from getting graphic. But as a content warning, we are going to be talking about SA. I'm very bad at that. I'm trying to get better at it. But now you know that's what we're going to be talking about. But this girl, this young woman, talked about going to the Team 10 house to hang out, or she was invited by some friends or something like that, meeting Jake Paul, going into his room, talking, making out, flirting, all of that. And then when it came time to do something sexual, to take things further, she expressed that she did not want to. And in her words, what he said was, well, if nothing's going to happen, then what's the point? And she repeated that a couple of times. And she repeated that a few times, I think, for a very important reason, to express that not only had she expressed a lack of consent, but he expressed acknowledgement of that lack of consent by saying, if nothing's going to happen, then what's the point? At which point she says that he grabbed her head and forced himself on her, and said that this act went on for about 30 seconds and until his moment came to fruition in her mouth, which makes me want to throw up. And Keemstar just cannot wrap his head around how this was any sort of violation of somebody's safety, comfort, civil rights, mental and emotional health, physical health. It was a violation of a lot of things. It was a violation of humanity. These men. So, Keemstar just wants to understand the physics. Just understand the physics of it. That's it. Well, Keemstar, just from a physics perspective, for one, men typically are larger and more physically strong than women, generally. Jasmine appears to be a pretty petite girl. Jake Paul is something like 6'2". So just on the basis of physical stature, Jake Paul is capable of forcing people to do things, particularly if those people are much smaller than him. He's just capable of it. From just a physics perspective, he is capable of forcing people to do things, especially by grabbing their body parts and forcing himself onto them. And I'm getting kind of tired. I'm hoping this video is going to be short because we've just talked about this so much already. We've talked about it with Dom and the Vlog Squad. We've talked about it with James Charles, not necessarily when it comes to actually like physical SA, but we have talked a lot about power and consent. Power and consent. And at the root of this situation too is power and consent. And even though we've been having this conversation for a while now, and especially this month being SA Prevention and Awareness Month, it still doesn't seem to be getting through to some people what constitutes consent. And that's just so fucking stupid and banana sandwich to me. It's stupid. It's so stupid because we've outlined it for you guys and some of you guys are refusing to accept it. And I have a theory about the kind of guy who pretends not to understand what it means. I have a theory about those kinds of guys and we'll get to it. It's nothing that's going to surprise you. It's nothing profound, I promise. But I talked in a previous video about how it seems, and then I also said Trisha Paytas made the same point and said it more succinctly. It seems that many people, particularly men, and I'm not saying all men, there are plenty of guys out there who get it and thus are not the ones on the wrong side of this fight. But there are plenty of men who tend to think that an SA did not occur if it wasn't violent, if the person wasn't kicking and screaming no in particular. And honestly, like those kinds of guys, even if the person was kicking and screaming and saying no, a lot of them will find other ways of like justifying their actions and pretending that it wasn't an SA. When, I hate to be the one to tell you, or do I? Do I really hate it? I don't know. I hate to be the one to tell you. I don't have any statistics, but I would venture to say most of us women who are sexually active or have been SA'd, at the very least, many of us can say that we have been in a situation that's made us really uncomfortable sexually. And I think our perception of what is considered consent needs to start erring on the side of caution and considering anything that's less than comfortable for both parties. Let's consider that non-consensual. I asked on Twitter, in response to this video by Keemstar, I said something along the lines of, if you've ever been in a situation where a guy has pressured you to the point of tears or almost tears, and so you finally gave in to get it over with, raise your hand. In fact, I would challenge you, raise your hand if that's been you. And underneath in the comments, it was just hand after hand after hand after hand. And every woman that I talk to, when we talk about subjects like this, we've all been there. Amy Schumer has a joke about this. She's joked, and I know that generally she's not like a beloved comedian, but she makes a point that hit home with enough of her audience that they responded. And her joke was something along the lines of, every woman or every girl has been a little bit R-worded. We've all been a little bit R-worded. And the audience laughed. The women in the audience laughed for the most part because, well, for one, I would argue that you've got to laugh in order to not cry. But we know the feeling. We know the feeling. And if you're a guy and you're watching this and you are like, this is news to you, just please take it in and please just trust me. Or if you don't trust me, ask to have an honest conversation with a friend that's a woman that you trust or that trusts you. I'm telling you, this is a thing. It's a very common thing. It's because of guys not just like Jake Paul doing these things, but it's also guys like Keemstar who try to pretend like, I don't know what the problem is. What's the problem?
I don't understand the physics here.
Like, I don't understand the physics. Like, from a scientific perspective, because I'm a physicist, and from a scientific perspective, this can't happen, so it's consensual. You, Keemstar. Keemstar can eat a bag of dick. And so, as I try to calm myself back down, returning to that old school definition of what's considered an SA, according to these dingbat guys who just can't seem to understand the nuance of consent. That's really not that nuanced. In a situation where, let's just be very clear, where a man gets hold of a woman, physically overpowers her, holds her down, and SAs her. And she's kicking and screaming in this hypothetical situation. She's kicking and screaming and shouting, no, 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 no. She's fighting and fighting and fighting. If she at some point, because surely this has happened many a time, if she at some point gives up the fight and lays limp to get it over with, is it at that point consensual? Because it's by the exact same logic. It is by the exact same logic. It's not even like Jake Paul might have misunderstood Jasmine, or maybe he just like failed to explicitly ask for consent, and then he came on to her and she didn't stop him, and so he didn't quite understand. She expressed that she did not want to do this, and he acknowledged that by saying, well, if nothing's going to happen, then what's the point? Right? We know that. And so I would beg the question, from the moment, like looking at this from a timeline, I'm if pretending that the camera is Keemstar, and I'm so sorry to you guys for me treating you and pretending that you're Keemstar. This is a super quick reminder to like this video and subscribe to my channel if that's something you want to do. If that's not something you want to do, just don't. I'll shut up and start talking now. But I would just ask Keemstar, looking at this timeline, from the moment Jake expressed that he wanted to engage in a sexual act, the moment that Jasmine said, no, I don't want to do that, the moment Jake said, well, if nothing's going to happen, then what's the point? To the moment that he shoved himself into her mouth, that millisecond before his body entered hers. Was any of that an essay? Because from what I understand, a lot of the comments under Keem's post, those that were in support of Jake, I keep wanting to say Jake Charles. Like, can something happen with the James Charles stuff already so that we can be done with him? My goodness. What was I even saying? People in support of either Jake Paul or Keemstar or SA in general, or just douchebaggery. I don't know. I hear that a lot of those comments are something along the lines of like, well, why didn't she bite him? Or like Keem, like, what about like doing this and saying no and like blah, blah, blah. Like, if it gets to the point where that has to happen, an essay has already occurred. If that needed to happen, if she should have done that, then she was already being essayed. Already. Past tense. It has happened. So whether or not she took that action of biting down on him or pushing him away, if she even could have done that with her, like, again, her diminutive stature, before she would have done those things, she already would have been SA'd. And so her doing that or not doing that didn't determine whether or not that's an SA. The lack of consent is what determines that that's an SA. And he didn't have consent. That's all it takes. This is so simple. This video should be 5 seconds long. When somebody says no, that means no. To the one person who's watching, I love you, thanks, bye. And it should be that simple. And it makes me so upset. Like, again, I hear that, well, he's just a troll. He's just a troll. And there is part of me that saw that and was like, he doesn't really believe the shit he's saying. He doesn't believe it. He's trying to get a rise out of people. He knows that people are going to share this. But what kind of message is that putting out to the audience that sees that? It teaches the audience that when somebody says no, that's a gray zone. That no means convince me or make it happen. No means give it a go. And if I don't fight you, then that no means yes. It communicates a lot of really unhealthy, destructive, awful, violating things. A lot of, and there are people out there that have picked up on this message and it's reinforced something so negative in them. People of all genders. Like, it's affecting all of us, whether we are on the perpetrator side of this issue or the victim side, or we've been both. It conditions us to believe that saying no is not enough. And I'm getting a little bit emotional because I've been there. I told you, I raised my hand, and I will tell you, and it's embarrassing to have already told you guys. Now this is the third time that I've told you guys that something has happened to me where I did not give consent. It's embarrassing because I grew up in, and I guess I'm still growing up in, a time where I am meant to feel ashamed of myself for those things happening. And having been on that side, I can tell you it is really, 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 really difficult to say no. Especially if you've got a certain personality type. Especially if you tend to be a pretty accommodating person. If you tend to be a people pleaser. It is really difficult to say no. It's difficult to say no in many situations. that are not of a sexual nature. Sometimes that expression of non-consent is just squirming and being like, well, I don't know. I'll tell you what, guys, if that happens, she's not consenting. I promise you. That's not some cute little game. It's not. But this girl had the strength to say that she did not want to do that, and Jake Paul completely violated her. Completely. Allegedly. I hate that I have to even say that. And this is another case where we're not even taking into account the power dynamics, which everybody sounds like a broken record at this point, hearing the word power imbalance or the words power imbalance or power dynamics. We say it over and over again because at this point, influencers need to understand what having a platform means. The dynamic between Jake Paul and Tana Mongeau is not the same as the dynamic between Jake Paul and some girl whose name we don't know. Some girl who doesn't have a large platform. A fan, James Charles. Or just your everyday layperson. It's not the same. So already you're talking about this person that's not only large in stature, but large in power. It's really, really difficult to say no to those people who have power. Like I said, it's already difficult enough for some of us to just say no to anybody. But the more powerful the person is that you're talking to, the easier it is to say yes, the more difficult it is to say no. So influencers just really should not be fucking around with fans and other people who see themselves as on a much lower status than they are. Don't be stupid about that, Keem. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. I get it that like stupidity is what's making you money, but for the sake of your daughter, don't be stupid on this one. Oh, I don't understand the physics of it. Well, physics. Go fucking take a physics class then. Take a physics class. They're lots of fun. And then right before I started filming, I remembered that I just saw the resurgence of another issue come up where Jessi Smiles and Keemstar got into it again. Apparently, Keem has always called Jessi a liar when it comes to the situation between her and Curtis Lepore. And if you're not aware with that situation, Jessi and Curtis are ex-Viners, and at a time after they'd broken up, not that that matters, but after they'd broken up, there was a time that Jessi was staying the night at Curtis's place. She was recovering from a possible concussion, was asleep, and woke up to find Curtis essaying her. And she was met with a lot of disbelief, which is so saddening that people can have the nerve to speak out against their abusers, and they can speak out to the public and say that these things happen. And this is the response that they're met with. Do better, America. Do better, world. Do better. Because this shit is fucked up. And of course, like, I don't know everything about that scene. And, you know, if Keemstar is friends with Curtis or whatever, it doesn't matter. We know that Alex James was friends with Curtis Lepore, and Curtis Lepore told Alex James, yes, he did this thing. Yes, he did it. And that's when Alex said that he stopped hanging out with Curtis and apologized to Jessi for ever spending time with him. You don't need anybody else to tell you why you should believe Jessi Smiles when you have not only confessions in court, on court documents, to his own friends. You don't need any more. You shouldn't have needed any of that in order to believe her story. But you got that, and you shouldn't need any more. And then Keem's defense is, Jessi has done... This was the stupidest thing I had heard in so long. She has slandered Gabby Hanna and much, much more. Really? That's your argument, Keem? Slandered Gabby Hanna and much, much more. Maybe you should have picked something out of that list of much, much more. Because slandered Gabby Hanna, which the world needs a lesson on what the word slander means, by the way. Slandered Gabby Hanna is probably not the strongest argument for why you should not believe a victim of SA. Or is it, Gabby Stans? You tell me. In the comments, you know? Like, you love to give me engagement in the comments, so do that. Love it. To you guys who might also be like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, physically, like, she didn't bite it. She didn't push him away. She didn't overpower him. She didn't kick and scream and go out running. And she didn't call the cops immediately. Like, all these things that guys like this say, when you say it, you are communicating to the rest of us, hey, I'm the kind of guy who does this sort of stuff. Because why not? Why not? Right? If there's nothing wrong with the situation, you're Jake Paul. You're in the room with this girl. She says, I don't want to do anything of this nature. And you go, well, if nothing's going to happen, then what's the point? And then decide to whip it out and force yourself on this girl. And if you're physically able to make it happen, to put, I don't know how not to make it sound graphic, but if you're physically able to put your body into that girl's mouth, physically, because of physics, it happened. If you're able to do that and there's nothing wrong with it, then why don't you do it? Do you do it? Have you done it? Hey, Keem, have you done that? And if you haven't, is it because there's something wrong with it, or just because, like, you haven't even been able to get that close to a girl except for your wife in order to have your daughter? I'm sorry to stoop so low as to be like, Keemstar, you can't even get fucked or whatever. But, like, it's a genuine question. Like, are you the kind of guy on the sidelines who never got laid, and so the only information you have about sex and how it works and how consent works and how people behave in these situations, is it all secondhand information from you? So are all of your friends the Jake Pauls of the world, and you're just gathering information and learning from them what's right and wrong, but not actually, like, putting anything into place? Or have you been that guy? Are you that guy who gets into these situations, has a girl alone, and then just completely violates any sense of comfort because due to physics, you were able to make it happen? You know what I'm saying? If you defend people like this, then I have no reason but to believe that you're the kind of guy who would do the same things. And none of us have any reason to believe otherwise as well. Nobody has any reason not to believe that you are that kind of guy. And that's concerning. Because every time a guy comes out and says, like, I don't see what he did wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. She's a liar. She slandered Gabby Hanna, so she must be lying. Like, every time you guys say something like that, it just makes me wonder, holy shit, how many victims are out there? Oh my God. When I tweet out, raise your hand if this has happened to you, and I just get response after response after response. Hands held high, different skin tones, different hair color, different genders. It's not even a question of how many victims out there, but it's just, on average, how many times has it happened to you? Because it's way too common. It's way too common, and it's happened to way too many of us, way too many times. And so whether you're trolling or just a dumb fucking sack of bricks, when you say shit like that, it's harmful. And I sure as hell would hope, Keemstar, that nothing like this ever happens to your daughter. But I believe, I hope, and I believe that should something like that ever happen, then you would want to knock that guy's teeth out. And then some. And the sad thing is that this message is never going to get to him. And it's not going to get to most guys. But we got to keep saying it as much as possible. And I can't go on about it anymore. So, sorry I got emotional towards the end. Don't want to end on a sad note, but that's really all there is to be said on this topic. To you, the one person who's watching, who's not me, thank you for watching to the end. Thank you for dealing with my rants and my tears. Or if you're new here, if you wouldn't mind hitting subscribe, I appreciate that. You can always unsubscribe. All the usual things. I love you guys. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.